Have you noticed how everything around you suddenly feels like it is shifting at the same time? Doors are closing faster than they are opening, friendships are changing, opportunities are delaying, your plans are not moving the way you expected, and deep inside your heart there is a strange quiet voice telling you not to panic but to prepare, because what if this is not confusion? What if this is positioning? What if this is not rejection but protection? What if right now in this very season God is quietly preparing you for a miracle season that is closer than you think? Because before heaven releases something extraordinary into your life, it first transforms the person who is going to receive it, and that transformation rarely feels comfortable. It feels like waiting, it feels like silence, it feels like uncertainty. But the truth is, miracles are never random. Miracles are scheduled, miracles are prepared, miracles are delivered to people who kept walking when nothing made sense. And if you are still here, still believing, still hoping, even after everything you have faced, then this message is not an accident. It is confirmation that something powerful is already moving behind the scenes in your life, even if you cannot see it yet, because God never prepares miracles in public. He prepares them in hidden seasons, where your faith grows stronger than your fear, where your patience becomes deeper than your frustration, and where your trust becomes louder than your doubts. And right now you may feel like nothing is happening, but heaven often works the hardest when life feels the quietest, because what feels like delay is often divine alignment, what feels like loss is often spiritual protection, and what feels like waiting is often the final preparation stage before breakthrough arrives. And the reason this season feels different from all the others you have walked through is because something different is coming into your life, something you did not expect, something you did not plan, something you could never create on your own strength, because miracle seasons never arrive through human effort alone. They arrive through divine timing, and divine timing always begins with preparation. And maybe you have already noticed how your mindset has started changing, how your tolerance for negativity has become smaller, how your desire for purpose has become stronger, how your heart no longer feels comfortable in places that once felt normal, and how certain relationships are quietly fading away, not because you failed them but because they were never meant to walk into your next season with you. And that is one of the clearest signs that God is preparing space in your life for something new, because before He sends what belongs in your future, He gently removes what belongs in your past. And even though it hurts sometimes, even though it confuses you sometimes, even though it makes you question what is happening sometimes, the truth is God is not taking something from you. He is making room for something greater than what you lost, because miracle seasons always begin with separation before they begin with celebration. And what you are experiencing right now is not abandonment, it is alignment, not punishment but preparation, not emptiness but construction. Because while you are waiting, God is arranging details you cannot see, connecting people you have not met, opening doors you cannot reach yet, and building opportunities that will arrive at the exact moment you are ready to walk through them. And the reason heaven waits until you are ready is because miracles are not just blessings, they are responsibilities. They are answers to prayers you once whispered during nights when nobody knew how much pressure you were carrying. And God remembers every one of those prayers, even the ones you thought were forgotten, even the ones you stopped repeating, even the ones you believed were impossible, because heaven never forgets what your heart cried for in silence. And sometimes the biggest sign that your miracle season is approaching is the sudden pressure you feel before the breakthrough arrives, because pressure is often proof that something powerful is being formed inside your life. And just like a seed must stay buried before it becomes a harvest, your destiny must stay hidden before it becomes visible. And the reason this hidden season feels longer than expected is because God is preparing something bigger than expected, something that cannot arrive until every detail is aligned and every Lesson is completed and every distraction is removed and every doubt is replaced with faith strong enough to carry what is coming next, because miracles change more than circumstances. They change identity, they change direction, they change purpose, they change the way you see yourself and the way you understand your future. And that is why preparation always comes before manifestation, because if the blessing arrived too early it would overwhelm you instead of elevate you. But God never releases miracles too early, and He never releases them too late. He releases them exactly on time. And if you are still standing after everything you have survived, if you are still believing after everything that tried to discourage you, if you are still moving forward even when progress felt invisible, then you are already closer to your miracle season than you realize, because endurance is one of the strongest signals that heaven is preparing something significant for your life. And the truth most people never hear is that miracle seasons rarely begin with excitement. They begin with uncertainty, they begin with questions, they begin with moments where nothing seems clear except the quiet feeling that something is about to change. And that quiet feeling you have been carrying lately, that sense that your life is standing on the edge of something new, that awareness that your old routine no longer fits the person you are becoming, that instinct telling you to stay patient even when answers are delayed, is not imagination, it is preparation. It is the signal that your spirit recognizes what your eyes cannot see yet, because before miracles appear around you, they first awaken something within you. And what is awakening inside you right now is strength. You did not know you had clarity, you did not know you needed courage, you did not know you were capable of carrying. And all of it is happening because God is preparing you not just to receive a miracle, but to step into a season where your life begins reflecting prayers that once felt impossible, and dreams that once felt distant, and promises that once felt unreachable. And when that season arrives, you will finally understand why certain doors closed, why certain paths changed, why certain people left, why certain plans failed, because everything that looked like interruption was actually preparation, everything that looked like silence was actually strategy, and everything that looked like waiting was actually positioning for the moment heaven decided it was time for your miracle season to begin. There is something powerful happening in your life right now, even if nothing around you looks different yet, because the truth is God does His deepest work in silence before He reveals His greatest miracles in public. And the season you are standing in today is not a punishment, and it is not a delay, and it is not a forgotten moment in your story, but it is preparation, because heaven never releases a miracle into a life that is not ready to carry it. And what you have been feeling lately, that pressure, that stretching, that emotional exhaustion, that confusion about why certain doors closed and why certain people walked away and why certain plans suddenly stopped working, is not random at all, because when Jesus begins preparing someone for a miracle season, He first removes everything that would interfere with what He is about to send into their life. And that is why things that once made sense suddenly stopped making sense. And people who once felt permanent suddenly became distant, and opportunities that looked promising suddenly disappeared, because God was not taking something from you, He was making space for something greater than what you were trying to hold on to. And what most people do not understand is that before every visible miracle there is always an invisible battle happening inside your spirit, where God begins strengthening your faith, teaching your patience, rebuilding your confidence, and healing wounds you did not even realize were still affecting your decisions. Because a miracle season does not just change your situation, it changes you. And the reason God is working inside you first is because what He is preparing to release into your life will require a stronger version of you than the one you used to be. And sometimes the hardest part of preparation is learning to trust God when nothing around you looks like progress, because real faith is not believing when you see results. but believing when you only hear His voice telling you to keep walking forward. There were moments recently when you almost gave up, and moments when you wondered if maybe you misunderstood what God promised you, and moments when you questioned why your life felt slower than everyone else's around you. But what you did not realize in those moments is that heaven was watching your response, not your circumstances, because God always studies how you behave in hidden seasons before He trusts you with visible blessings. And every time you chose to keep praying even when you were tired, every time you chose to stay kind even when people misunderstood you, every time you chose to keep believing even when your heart felt heavy, you were proving that your spirit was becoming strong enough to carry what God is about to release. And there is something else happening that many people miss during miracle preparation seasons, and that is the shift inside your mindset, because God cannot place something extraordinary into a mind that still believes ordinary limitations about itself. And that is why lately you have been feeling different about your future, different about your purpose, different about what you are willing to accept in relationships, and different about how you see yourself, because Jesus has been quietly replacing your old thinking with new vision and new courage and new clarity. And this inner transformation is the signal that your miracle season is closer than you think, because God always changes how you see before He changes what you see. You may not realize it yet, but some of the disappointments you experienced recently were actually protection disguised as rejection, because if certain doors had opened too early, they would have distracted you from what God was preparing, and if certain people had stayed, they would have delayed what God planned, and if certain opportunities had succeeded, they would have led you somewhere smaller than the place Jesus is guiding you toward now. And sometimes what feels like loss is actually alignment, and sometimes what feels like silence is actually strategy, and sometimes what feels like waiting is actually positioning, because God never wastes your time, He only prepares your timing. There is a reason your heart has been feeling restless lately even when nothing obvious changed around you, and that reason is because your spirit can sense what your eyes cannot see yet, because when God begins moving miracles closer into your life, your soul starts recognizing the shift before your circumstances reveal the evidence. And that quiet feeling inside you that something is about to change is not imagination, it is confirmation that heaven is already moving in your direction, even if the results have not appeared yet. Jesus is not preparing a small blessing for you, He is preparing something that will make sense of the confusion you walked through, something that will answer prayers you almost stopped praying, something that will restore hope you thought you lost forever, and something that will remind you why the waiting season was necessary in the first place, because miracles from God are never random events, they are carefully timed moments designed to arrive exactly when your heart is strong enough, your faith is deep enough, and your path is clear enough to receive them without losing them again. And what makes this season even more powerful is the fact that your obedience during uncertainty has already opened doors in the spiritual world that you cannot see yet, because every prayer you whispered, every tear you tried to hide, and every moment you chose to trust God instead of quitting created movement in places you could not reach on your own. And heaven responds to that kind of faith in ways that surprise people when the results finally appear, because God always rewards persistence that continues even when there is no visible reason to keep believing. This is why you cannot give up now, because the moment people usually quit is the exact moment miracles usually begin forming behind the scenes. And the enemy always tries to make the waiting season feel longer than it really is so that you stop expecting what God already scheduled for your life. But the truth is your miracle season has already started quietly, and the evidence is the strength you did not have before, the peace you did not understand before, the clarity you did not recognize before, and the courage you did not feel before, because Jesus never prepares someone for a miracle without first giving them the inner strength to recognize it when it arrives. Something is shifting around you even if nobody else can see it yet, and something is aligning for you even if you cannot explain it yet, and something is being arranged in your favor even if you cannot touch it yet, because God does not prepare miracles in noise, He prepares them in silence. And the silence you have been walking through recently was never emptiness, it was construction, and the next season of your life is going to reveal why this preparation period was necessary and why every step you kept taking, even when it was difficult, was leading you exactly where Jesus wanted you to be all along. There comes a moment in your life when everything around you feels uncertain, relationships feel distant, doors seem closed, and even the people you trusted the most begin to disappear quietly from your path. And in that confusing silence you start wondering if something is going wrong with your life. But what you don't realize is that this is often the exact moment when God begins doing His deepest work inside your spirit, because before He brings something sacred into your life, He first creates space for it. And that space is usually formed through separation, through waiting, through moments when you feel misunderstood and even forgotten. Yet heaven has not forgotten you for a single second, because God never prepares miracles publicly. He prepares them privately inside hearts that are willing to trust Him even when nothing makes sense. And the reason your journey has felt slower than others is not because you are behind, but because what God is building for you cannot be rushed. It must be protected, shaped, and aligned perfectly with your purpose, so that when it finally arrives it does not break you but completes what He started inside you long ago. And maybe lately you've noticed something changing within you that you cannot explain. Maybe the things that once excited you no longer satisfy you. Maybe conversations that used to feel meaningful now feel empty. Maybe the version of yourself that once tolerated confusion and emotional chaos is slowly disappearing. And that is not random at all, because when God prepares you for a miracle season, He first transforms your desires so that you stop chasing temporary comfort and begin recognizing eternal direction. He shifts your focus away from what looks impressive on the outside and starts building strength on the inside where nobody can see it yet everyone will eventually feel it when your moment arrives. And sometimes this transformation feels lonely because growth often separates you from environments that cannot support the person you are becoming. But that loneliness is not punishment, it is protection. It is alignment, it is preparation for something that will require a stronger version of you than the world has seen before. You may not realize it yet, but the battles you fought quietly, the nights you cried without telling anyone, the prayers you whispered when you felt invisible, all of those moments were shaping your spirit into someone who can carry blessings without losing humility and who can receive love without losing identity, because God never sends destiny into a heart that is not ready to protect it. And right now He is teaching you how to recognize what is real and what is temporary, so that when your miracle finally appears you do not confuse it with something that only looks like an answer but was never meant to stay. There is also a reason why certain opportunities disappeared even when you were sure they were meant for you, and at the time it felt confusing and even painful, but what looked like rejection was actually redirection, because God was removing paths that would have delayed your purpose instead of delivering you to it. And sometimes heaven closes doors not because you are unworthy but because what waits behind those doors cannot recognize the future God has planned for you, so instead He leads you through quieter roads where your faith becomes stronger than your fear and your patience becomes louder than your doubt. And in those quiet roads something powerful begins happening inside you that nobody else can measure except the one who created your destiny before anyone even knew your name. Right now there is a spiritual shift happening around your life even if you cannot see it clearly yet. Conversations are changing, timing is changing, your reactions are changing. And that is the evidence that preparation is already in progress, because when God prepares you for a miracle season He does not just change your circumstances. He changes your perspective so that when the blessing arrives you recognize it instantly instead of questioning it, and that recognition becomes the moment when everything you once doubted suddenly begins making sense at the same time, like pieces of a story finally connecting after years of confusion. So if this season feels slower than you expected, if answers feel delayed, if clarity feels distant, do not mistake silence for absence, because sometimes silence is the strongest sign that heaven is working behind the scenes in ways your eyes cannot yet understand but your spirit is already beginning to feel. And very soon the same season that once tested your patience will become the season that proves why God never allowed you to settle for less than what He designed specifically for your life. And when that moment arrives you will realize that every delay was protection, every waiting period was preparation, and every quiet tear you cried became part of the miracle story that God was writing for you all along. There is a moment in your life when everything begins to shift quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way the world can easily see, but deeply inside your spirit, where God begins removing the last pieces of who you used to be so you can finally become the person your destiny has been waiting for. Because before He brings the right people into your life He prepares your heart to recognize them, to protect them, and to walk with them in purpose instead of confusion. And right now what you are experiencing is not delay but divine refinement, not loneliness but spiritual alignment, not rejection but protection from relationships that looked right on the outside yet carried the wrong assignment for your future. And the reason some connections disappeared without explanation is because God saw what you could not see. He heard conversations you never heard, He understood intentions you never understood, and He loved you enough to close doors you were still praying would stay open, because your destiny is too valuable to be damaged by temporary attachments that were never meant to travel with you into your next season. And while it felt painful at the time, you are beginning to realize that every ending carried a hidden mercy, every goodbye carried a silent rescue, and every disappointment carried a redirection towards something stronger, deeper, and more aligned with your calling. Because when God prepares you for a divine relationship He does not just change your circumstances, He changes your vision, He changes your standards, He changes your patience, and most importantly He changes what your heart is willing to accept. And suddenly the things that once impressed you no longer move you, the attention that once satisfied you no longer fulfills you, and the connections that once felt exciting now feel empty because your spirit has outgrown what your past once tolerated. And this is not confusion, this is elevation, this is not loss, this is preparation. This is not punishment, this is positioning, because God is teaching your heart how to recognize peace instead of chaos, consistency instead of confusion, and purpose instead of distraction. and sometimes that lesson requires silent seasons where nothing seems to move forward but everything inside you is being rebuilt, strengthened, and purified so that when the right person finally walks into your life you will not sabotage the blessing by carrying old fears, old insecurities, or old expectations into something God designed to be new, stable, and lasting. And what you may not realize yet is that while you were waiting for answers, God was building endurance inside you. While you were waiting for clarity, God was strengthening your discernment. And while you were waiting for someone to arrive, God was shaping you into someone ready to receive what you once prayed for but were not yet prepared to keep. Because divine relationships are not accidents, they are assignments, and assignments require preparation, maturity, and timing that only God can orchestrate, which means the season you are in right now is not empty even if it feels quiet, it is not meaningless even if it feels slow, and it is not forgotten even if it feels hidden. Because heaven is working behind the scenes in ways your eyes cannot yet see but your spirit is already beginning to sense. And one day very soon you will look back at this exact season and realize that what felt like waiting was actually God building the strongest foundation your future relationship could ever stand on. And when that realization comes you will finally understand why nothing worked before, why certain people disappeared without warning, why some doors never reopened no matter how many times you knocked, and why your heart kept feeling pulled away from connections that looked right but never felt peaceful, because God was not removing something good from your life. He was protecting something greater that had your name written on it long before you even knew what you were praying for. And what most people don't realize is that one of the clearest signs God is preparing you for the person He designed for your life is when He begins to change what your heart is attracted to, because suddenly the things that once impressed you don't impress you anymore, the attention that once excited you no longer satisfies you. The relationships that once felt enough now feel incomplete. And it's not because something is wrong with you but because something is growing inside you, something deeper, something wiser, something more aligned with heaven's timing. And while others may think you're becoming distant or too selective, what's really happening is that God is protecting your future by adjusting your desires so you don't settle for what looks good but instead wait for what is truly meant for you. Sparkles. There are moments in this season when you may feel like you're walking alone, like everyone else is moving forward in love while you are standing still, watching, waiting, wondering if your turn will ever come. But what you don't see is that heaven is working behind the scenes in ways your eyes cannot yet understand, because the same God who is shaping your heart is also shaping someone else's heart at the exact same time, preparing conversations you haven't had yet, building connections you haven't made yet, and aligning paths you haven't crossed yet. And even though it feels quiet right now, silence is often the place where God does His deepest preparation. Crescent moon. Sometimes God allows disappointment not to punish you but to protect you, because if certain relationships had worked out the way you wanted, they would have led you away from the person who is truly meant for your destiny, and that's why what felt like rejection was actually redirection. What felt like loss was actually protection, and what felt like delay was actually divine timing working perfectly in your favor, even when you couldn't see it at the time. And the truth is, the person God is preparing for you is not just someone who will walk into your life randomly one day without purpose, but someone who is being carefully aligned with your growth, your calling, your healing, and your future, someone who will recognize the strength you built in your lonely seasons and the faith you held onto in your uncertain seasons. Someone who will not be confused about your value because they will arrive at the exact moment when your heart is strong enough to receive the love you once prayed for but weren't yet ready to carry. There is a reason your standards are changing, a reason your patience is growing, a reason your heart is becoming calmer instead of desperate, and it's because God is preparing you not just to meet the right person but to recognize them when they finally appear, because timing without readiness creates confusion but readiness with timing creates clarity, peace, and certainty that doesn't need constant reassurance. You may not realize it yet, but every prayer you whispered late at night, every tear you tried to hide from others, every moment you wondered if God had forgotten about your desire for love was actually being heard and recorded in heaven, and none of those moments were wasted, because God uses hidden seasons to build visible miracles, and when the right person finally enters your life, you will understand why the waiting was necessary and why the preparation had to happen first. And what's beautiful about this season is that while you think you are simply waiting, God is actually transforming you into someone stronger, wiser, more patient, and more spiritually grounded than you were before, and the person who eventually walks beside you will not just meet the version of you that once struggled but the version of you that survived, trusted, and kept believing even when things didn't make sense. So if you've been feeling like something inside you is changing lately, like your priorities are shifting and your heart is becoming more peaceful even in uncertainty, that is not random, that is not coincidence, and that is not delay without purpose, that is preparation happening in real time, because before God brings two people together, He first makes sure both hearts are ready to recognize the blessing when it arrives.